Greetings hobbyists, this is Artisans of Vaul and welcome to the second part in our follow through making a series of bases for Adeptus Titanicus. If you haven't seen the first in the series of these videos, then the link can be found in the description, and I suggest you watch that one first so you can get yourself to this point. In this video we're going to be starting to add some detailing to this base, and we're going to be using some different techniques to do it. But before we do that, let's get into solving the problem that I left you with in the last video. So I left you in the last video with the issue that our tiles don't look quite right. If I press / to isolate these and look on the Z-axis, hopefully you noticed that our gap on the X-axis, we can use our gimbal here to show that that's that direction, looks wider than our gap on the Y-axis, which is here. And that's because we haven't applied the scale, and at the moment the X-axis is set at 1, whereas the Y-axis is set at 0.5. So while we've got a constant offset here to give a gap of 0.5 meters, we're actually only getting half of that. So all we need to do to fix that is press Ctrl and A and apply the scale, and you'll notice suddenly that fixes everything. Now if we come out of isolation here by pressing /, we can see that that has meant that now that extra gap has meant that we do need to reduce our count, and we're going to have to do the same for the duplicated tiles that we used for this upper section, because they've got the same issue. So Ctrl A, scale, and then let's have a look at this axis, and we're just going to G and then constrain it to the Y axis by pressing Y and make sure we've got that slight overhang again that looks quite nice. So a really easy fix, but it's only an easy fix because of the fact that we haven't applied anything at this point. We haven't applied our arrays and we haven't started merging things together, which is one of the reasons why it's so good to keep everything separated until you really have to put things together. The first thing I want to do is I want to add in some stairs, because while this large step would be scalable for a Titan, for the average person, which is being represented by this object here, that's the height of a person for Adeptus Titanicus, that's going to be way too large. So I'm going to go into this block here, and again we kept this separate to make this easier. I'm going to go into edit mode by pressing tab, and this could be any edit mode. I've got it on vertex mode at the moment, but it could be either of them. And I'm going to press Ctrl and R to start putting in an edge loop. Now you'll notice that if I put my mouse relatively in the middle, Blender doesn't know what direction I want this edge loop to go. If you put your cursor over the point where it's getting towards one of the edges, it will snap to that and try to cut it. So for example, if I went here, it will try to cut it horizontally. We want it vertically. Then I'm going to scroll up on my mouse wheel to get 2. This is going to be either side of the staircase, and I'm going to hit my left mouse button, and at that point I could move it around if I want to. I'm actually just going to press escape so that's there, and I'm going to deal with the exact size in a little bit. Now what I want to do is I want to have this the same width as essentially some of these tiles so that it lines up a little better. It's going to look a little neater, and also this is probably a bit wide for a staircase. I mean, if you wanted it this wide you could easily have it this wide. So I need to select the edges. Now to do that I'm going to go into edge mode. I'm going to come up here and click. You could just press the 2 on your keypad and that would work as well. And I want to select just this edge. Now if I go into isolated mode by clicking /, we've got a problem here. While this would be okay in some circumstances, I need to move all of the edges here, all of the ones going all the way around this cube, not just this one, otherwise it's going to cause us problems making our staircase. So what you can do is hold down Alt and click the edge, and it will select all of the edges in that loop. It's a nice quick way of doing it. Now if I come back out of isolation mode and I put snapping on, and I'm going to be snapping to an edge, which it already was selected on, but just so you can see how to do that, I'm going to have this going up to this, the edge of this tile. So G, and then I want to be moving the X-axis, and I'm going to go onto the edge of that tile. I'm going to do the same thing for this one. So click on the edge with Alt, press down, and I think I probably want this maybe about that wide. That seems good. So let's go to this edge of this tile, G to grab, X to just be in the X-axis, selecting that tile edge, and now I've got the correct width for our staircase. So I've got mine 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of these wide. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to decide on the height of our stairs, and to do that I'm going to actually move this guy here, which is our reference for how tall a person could be, to be a little bit lower so we can sort of judge how many steps we want to have and how high a step should be. So I'm going to turn off snapping, G and Z, bring them down to the sort of height of our tiles there on our base. And I'm going to go back in on the y-axis to be able to look at this, select the block that we're putting our stairs into, tab to tab into this mode, and I'm going to press Control and R again, go to that edge and decide how many stairs I want. Now looking at this, I actually think this might be a bit tall, so I'm actually going to change things before I do this. I'm going to go back into vertex mode and I'm going to press Shift and Z. This is really important you press Shift and Z. If I select these top vertices this way and go around, you can see the vertices at the back have not been selected, and that would cause a big problem. If I move this down, G and Z, you'll see it's not moving everything equally. So let's go back into the front, Shift and Z, select again, and now that has selected everything. I could have also done Alt and clicked on one of the edges and that would have done the same thing, but this works fine. I'm going to go back into that front mode, G and Z to move it down, and I think somewhere like that. That looks about right to me. I think that would be sort of a good height without being too much and getting in the way. Notice the tiles haven't moved down. I'm going to deal with those later. That's not a problem at the moment. So go back to this one, tab into edit mode, Control R, and I think stairs probably about that size. I'm just scrolling up on my mouse wheel. I mean, it's slightly exaggerated, but that's fine. We want to be able to see them, so let's go for that. So at the moment I've got 5 cuts, and you can see the number of cuts in the bottom right hand corner, and you're just changing those with your scroll wheel. So somewhere about there. I don't want to move them up and down. I'm just going to press escape. Now we do have a slight issue here, and that is if we have a look from the side, you can see that actually, because of the way we've set this up, this block is down to here, and the tiles come up for that, which means everything's going to be a little bit short, or at least this first step's going to look a little bit short. So let's fix that. Shift and Z, and then holding down Shift, I'm going to select those top ones as well, so we've got everything. And knowing that this tile is 1mm tall, I'm going to press G and Z, and we're just going to rise it up by 1mm so that now all the steps are going to be the same size, and that will work out fine. Back into edit mode. So we're going to extrude these steps. Now extruding is such a useful tool in Blender. It allows you to add in lots of little details relatively quickly. To do so, we're going to go into face mode, and I'm going to select those faces. Now extruding normally is just done with one shortcut key, which is to use E. If you're following along, don't do this because I'm about to do something wrong. So if I press E, I can extrude that out, or I can extrude it back. But you can see if I extrude it back into this object, I'm just going to click to confirm that. I'll undo this in a second, so don't have followed along that. It's caused a problem in that it hasn't understood what to do with this top face, and that is going to cause all manner of problems later on. Now there are ways of fixing this after the fact, and that's okay, but actually Blender has got something on it that will sort this out. So I'm going to press Control and Z, and I'm actually going to use this side panel here. Now if you can't see this panel, it's because it's hidden. If you just press T, it'll come back out, and it's got all the tools that we normally just use keypad shortcuts for, and generally that's better, but for some you actually have options. For example, this extrude one, if I keep and hold clicking down, we can extrude in different ways, and we want to extrude manifold, which means it's going to fix these problems with making a manifold object. I'll talk about manifold objects in a later video. It's not really the time for it now. And if I just click on this button, I can extrude this back, and it's not going to cause any problems. If you notice, if I just press Control Z, sometimes this does show problems while you're doing it. You can see that line just here as if it's having issues, but once you release, it's generally now we want to extrude this back, essentially the thickness of a tile, and that is going to be 5mm or 5, whatever the units are, plus this half that's the gap. There's a couple of ways I can do that. First, I can look in the top left hand corner. I could attempt to judge this, but that's going to be almost impossible. Or while holding down, I can press 5.5 minus and it will do it for me, and then release and it's fine. So that's one way of doing it. Now we're going to do the second set of steps as well. So I'm going to just select one less. So I'm going to press Shift and unselect the bottom one. The other way of doing it is I can just sort of go back any amount, and then where it has our information. Again, if you aren't seeing this, it will tell you what command you've just done and you can click on it. And at the moment it's gone back Z minus 2 point something. If I click on that and just type in minus 5.5, it will alter my last action as long as I've clicked off of it. So there's two ways of doing that. I'm just going to carry on doing this, just typing it in while I hold it back. So 5.5 minus, one less step, 5.5 minus, and then just the final step, 5.5 minus. And now we've got these steps, and this is going to be a manifold object, which is not going to cause us any problems with printing. So really, really useful, really quick way of making steps. There are other ways as well, but that is probably the simplest and the fastest. It does cause one problem though, which we're going to fix straight away. It's not a big problem, but it is something that's good to keep on top of so you don't have lots of things to fiddle around with later, and you never know when these things could cause problems. If I go back into vertex mode by clicking 1, you can see at each stage here it's created a new vertex along this top. I'm still in, if you notice, extrude mode, so I'm going to go to this up here to go back into select mode. And we don't want those. They can cause issues. So I'm actually just going to select each one by pressing Shift, and then all I'm going to do is press Control and X, and that dissolves. Notice this isn't deleting the vertices, it's dissolving them. That's why I didn't press Delete. I'll do the same the other side as well. Once again, Control and X, and we've got that sorted. I could leave the steps like that, but you know what? Let's add some extra detailing in. It'd be a shame not to have tiles or something similar on this. Now I could do this in a couple of ways. The first way is I could copy individual rows of these tiles and put them on here. That'd be fine. It's going to be a bit long-winded, and there's another way of doing it. So let's do it this other way, just as a way of practicing a new technique. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press Control and R, and again use this to put in some loops on this object. And at this point I need to decide how many tiles that I want. So I'm going to go for, let's make these bigger tiles. I'm going to go for something like 5. So now I've got 5 and I've decided I like it. I'm actually going to double that to 10. You'll see why in a second. So 10, click, press escape to go off of it. Now I want to add in the gaps between the tiles. But before we do that, we need to set this up. And we'll have a bit of a problem if we do this straight away. What we're going to do is we're going to use a bevel tool to make the gap, to basically split this apart. But if I press Control and B, you'll notice if you look at the back of each step that it's trying to bevel that as well, because that edge has been selected. So we want to stop that. So I'm going to go into edge mode. I'm going to select the first loop, and at that point I'm going to hold down Shift and Alt and select each other one. If you do select something wrong like I did just there, just keep your Alt and Shift down and just select off of it. So now I've selected those. All I need to do at this point is press Control and B, and I can bevel that. Now if you've beveled things with more edges before, you might have this, and we don't want lots and lots of edges. And if I just use my scroll wheel, I can either make that up and down, and we just want to have 2, which essentially is one segment. You can see that just down at the bottom here. And as I move my mouse away or towards the point where I started doing this, it makes this wider. And you're sort of going to have to eyeball this, unfortunately. So I think that looks about right. So I'm going to click. So let's get these put in place. Now I'm going to use that manifold offset again, which is going to require a little bit more fiddling, only because we don't have some add-ons. If you've watched my settings video and you made the decision to buy the add-on hard op, there is a quicker way of doing this, which is going to require slightly less stages, but at the moment I'm just going to focus on this in vanilla. So what I'm doing is I'm selecting every other one of my gaps, and then the one above I'm going to select the opposite ones, which is going to keep this brick pattern. So I'm just going to do that for the rest of my steps. So just double check your selection and then go back into the extrude manifold, and we're just going to go down. Again, I'm pretty happy to just eyeball this at about that depth. Now if I tab off of this, you can see that looks pretty good, but actually I want to go in along this front face as well, just so they look like really solid blocks. So I'm going to press tab again to go back into that, and now I'm just going to select the front faces. And we have to do this separately unless we use an app like HardOps. I speak about that in my video on settings, but this is not that much longer. It's only when you're doing things on a massive amount that that's going to take a lot longer to do. So let's get these all selected. I'm holding Shift down while I select them. And choosing to not do that top section, just because with what I've got planned, you're going to barely be able to see it, because we're going to bring the tiles down and have a slight overlap there. So that's not going to be too much of a problem. And then again, I'm just going to select that, eyeball it back to about there. And I think that looks pretty good with those larger slabs. Could have done them much larger if I wanted to. That could look quite nice as well, but pretty happy with that. So let's get the tiles in place and see how this looks. Selecting the tiles, press X to side on. We need snapping. G, then select Z, so it's just going on the Z axis. Selecting that edge there, and then turn that off. G and Z and -1. Great, tiles are in place, but we've got the tiles now hanging over the top of our selection of stairs. And we're obviously going to want to fix that. It looks rubbish and it would never print with these bits floating there, so that's going to be a problem. So what we're going to do is we're going to delete out these tiles. Now you'll notice that we've still got all the arrays here in place, so we can't do that individually. We could apply this and do it individually, but that would just be a pain, so we're not going to do that. We're going to use a Boolean, which is the better way to do this. So what I'm going to do, just to make this quicker and to just get everything at the right size, or at least at the right size to begin with, I'm going to isolate my block with the stairs, press Tab and then 2 to go into edge mode. I'm going to select that edge. I've still got extrude on, so I'm going to go to the selection just to make that nice and clear. So I'm going to select that edge, then I'm going to press Control and click there, which will select all of the edges up to that point, and then Shift and that edge there. And essentially I'm just stealing this geometry to make a block out of. So all I need to do is press Shift and D, and that has duplicated it. Okay, and I can move that around if I use the grab tool as we've done before. I don't want to move that anywhere. I actually want to press Escape so it's back where it came from. And then I'm going to separate that by pressing P and Selection, and now that's a separate object. And if I press Tab, I can select just this edge by itself. Press Tab again to go into edge mode, and you can see that I've got all of these edges. In fact, if I go out of isolation mode and back into it again with this selected, we can just see just these edges. So Tab, go into vertex mode. Let's fix these bits that are going to cause issues. Okay, those vertexes that are all on just a line now, dissolve them, and I'm just going to select all these vertices, and then if I press F, it will fill them. So we've now got something to potentially use. But at this point, it's just a 2D object. It's a plane, so I'm going to need to extrude that. So I'm going to go into face mode. Could have just pressed 3 as well. Select it, press E to extrude, and just extrude it up a decent amount. We don't really need to be very precise at this point because of what we're going to use it for. And back here. So at the moment, we've got this block just hovering in midair, and we're going to use this to delete our tiles. So the first thing is, because of where our tiles are, there's a slight overlap here, and we only went 5.5 back, which was the tile and a bit. We can see that the same amount of overlap is there, so let's move this out. So I'm going to go back into edge mode. I'm only wanting to delete from this tile onwards, so I'm going to press G and Y and go up to this edge of this tile. So we're not going to delete any of those tiles. Go back out of snapping mode. And also, at this point, it's not going to delete all the tiles, it's only going halfway down, so G and Z, and make sure we're covering those tiles. So we're going to delete this object from this object, and that uses a Boolean. So I select the object that I want to have the things deleted from, which is the tiles, and click Add Modifier, Boolean, and I want a difference Boolean, which is automatic. A union Boolean is where you get these joining together. An intersect Boolean means that you just get the combination of what's in the space of the place they overlap. So we want a difference, and we're just going to select with the dropper icon this cube. And it looks like nothing's happened. Now that's a problem, because actually it hasn't cut it, and that's sometimes an issue with the Boolean. Now this causes some issues with sometimes you want to use exact and sometimes you want to use fast, and to be honest, there are points where the exact should work and the fast shouldn't, but it goes the other way around. So what I just generally do is see if it works, and yes, it has worked if I click fast. The only issue is here that it has not got rid of that section there of this tile. It's making just a plane there because they're on, if I unhide it, they're on the same, basically exact coordinates for the Y. So all I'm going to do is select this one, tab into face mode, and I'm just going to G and Y a tiny bit more so they're not on the same. Notice I'm not going into that tile. Edit out and press H, and everything's looking really good. Very happy with that. So we've got our tiles here from our upper edge. We've got a bit of an offset there, so it looks quite interesting. Okay, and then we've got our stairs here. Now at this point we could leave this. It's causing some visual errors here, but when we bring everything together it'll be fine. But I actually think I want a little bit of that overhang here as well. So I'm going to select this, and I'm going to select these faces. So make sure I'm in face mode, face, 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 and face. I'm just going to go G and X, and actually make sure I've got that little bit of an overhang there, which I think looks quite nice. I think it looks way more interesting. And I'm going to do the same the other side. Select the faces, come in, G and X, and again have a bit of an offset there. Now this has created what could be an issue if we did this later. You'll notice that because I only selected these faces, it's left that line at an angle. Now this isn't going to be a problem for what we're doing, but there are instances where it can be. So you've just got to sort of know what we're doing. But as I'm not planning on doing anything more with these, that shouldn't be an issue. So now I've got my nice steps where we could theoretically have these people walking up and down. Okay, slightly exaggerated in scale. You could be more accurate to this if you wanted to make more steps, but you want to be able to see these from a bit of a distance, so it sort of helps to have that slight exaggeration when we're dealing with things in a scale as small as Adeptus Titanicus or Epic. At this point, let's save this, File, and I'm going to click Save As, not just Save. There's a reason for this. If you remember in my last video, I said that we should add a number, so I've called this AT-base1, and we want to keep that AT-base1 file. Don't know if something's going to go wrong later on, or there might be something I notice I want to change, so I want to keep that. And I can just type in here, but if you actually just click that plus button, it automatically ups the number by 1, and then just click Save, so it's a nice quick tool to use. Now, while the Imperium isn't exactly health conscious, it could look really good to have some sort of nice rail along here to add some extra detail and add some interest. So let's start doing that. First thing I want to do is make sure that my representation of a person is relatively close to this, so we can make sure that we're getting everything about the right size. So let's bring him down to about there. And then we're going to add in a cube just to make things a little bit easier and to give some options on what we're going to do in terms of the style. So cube comes in there. Let's move it up to approximately where our figure is, and then go to Z and put that over our tiles. Now let's go to the front and start working on some sizes, and I find it's easier to do that when looking at specific angles. Just makes it a bit easier to do. So let's scale that up a little bit. Now remember, we're going to put a banister on top of this, so let's not make it massive. We don't want it to be taller than a person would be, but something around chest height would be perfectly acceptable once we've got the rail involved. So that looks about good. Let's G and Z that a little bit higher, so I'll just press S to scale that up. Let's have a look at how wide that is. Now bear in mind that this is 5mm, that's going to be about 2 to 3 wide. Perfectly acceptable. Let's make it just a tiny bit bigger so that we've got enough space. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So let's add some detail in. So let's tab into edit mode. We're on edge mode at the moment, that's fine. Let's press Ctrl and R and add in, I don't know, something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these loops. Actually do press escape so they're there, and actually I'm going to press Alt to select the bottom one, Control and B, and we're going to bevel that so it's really just tiny. Now notice that we've still got lots of, or we can have loads of bevels, so we're just going to scroll that down to 1 and make sure it's really small. Right, so let's go into face mode and press Alt and then Shift and Alt to select those, and then we're going to scale these to make them smaller to make everything look a little bit interesting. So S, but you'll notice this is scaling it on every axis, including the Z axis, which means it gets smaller and smaller as we go into the center, and that's it's okay, but it's not great. So let's fix that first of all. So if we press Shift and Z, what that does is it means that everything works except for on the Z axis. So it's now scaling on just the X and the Y. So we're going to scale that in quite a lot. Let's press Alt to select those, and then we're going to scale it again, Control and S, so that it's not scaling it on the Z axis. We're going to make that come out there. So you're sort of getting the gist of the shape here, but we want to make it a bit more rounded. So what I'm going to do is go into Edge Mode, 2 for Edge Mode, or I could have clicked up there, and then we're going to press Alt and select that edge, Shift and Alt for that edge, Shift and Alt for that edge, Shift and Alt for that edge, and Control and B to bevel it. And you can see what that's doing of sort of smoothing everything out. I'm actually going to up the count a little bit to somewhere in the region of 3. And that should look fine, especially at the scale that we're at. Alt and select that one, and then we can do the same thing, but I'm going to scale that a bit bigger and maybe add in up to 5 there. So a really quick little column there. And pretty happy with that, looking quite nice now. Do I like this in sort of square section, or do we want it rounded? Let's have a look. And obviously you can make a decision of what you want to do. So tab into Edge Mode again, Alt to select that edge, Shift Alt, that one, and that corner, and that corner. And what I definitely want the base square, so I'm going to actually press Shift and unselect that, and those. And those, and let's Control and B. Let's have a look, something like there. Do I need that many? Yeah, probably. Okay, and tab out. Yeah, I think I prefer that. If you prefer the square section, that's perfectly fine. So let's keep that the way it is. So we want multiples of these going along. You'll notice just on a point for 3D printing that what I haven't done is I haven't made this extreme flat cut off there. I've made it more graduated, and that's going to help with the 3D printing. And that's a really good tip for 3D printing, is to have these graduated edges that go into any surface. Right, so let's multiply this out. So we're going to just use an array. So add modifier array, and we want it going along the X. But we've nearly done the same thing that we did in our last video. We haven't applied the scale, and if I start using a constant offset, which I'm going to, that's going to cause problems. So let's first of all Control A, scale, make sure the scale's at 1, get off that relative offset and onto the constant offset, and I want one of these per column. So at the moment the column is 10 wide, plus an extra ½ millimeter there, so 10.5. And I can add to the count of that. Now, thinking about this, maybe you want a little bit more. You're welcome to keep it like this, but this large flat area where we're going to have the banister going on, again, is a point where you potentially are going to get an error in printing. Essentially, you're going to get something going wrong in the middle unless you add in supports, then you're going to have to file and sand down the support. So if we can add something structural in there that's going to look a little bit better, then that could work. So what I'm actually going to do is, instead of having it 10.5, I'm going to have that 10.5 divided by 2, essentially 5.25, but that's fine. And now we're getting 2 per column. I'm just going to press G and X to move that along a little bit. And if I up the count, I actually think that looks better, and it's going to solve the problem with the 3D printing. So that looks good. Right, and then we want this going back as well. We could just leave it there if we wanted to, but let's Shift and D to duplicate that. I'm going to press Escape. So essentially it's on top of the other one. R and Z, and we're going to go 90 minus to have that there. And obviously at the moment this isn't right. It's going 5.25, but our tile this way is 5 plus half, so we actually want 5.5. So that's nice in the middle, and let's take the count down to there. Great, really happy with that. Let's put that over to the other side. So we're gonna select, right, first problem, what I've nearly done here is, at the moment, can we see that there is here 2 columns over the top of each other? That is not going to go well. So I want G and Y, and we're just gonna move it 5.5 minus to have it that way. And I'm just gonna reduce the count by 1. Where's that array gone? Here. Reduce that by 1. That would have been a really big problem. You don't want things, identical objects on top of each other, so that's always something to watch out for. Shift click, so I've got both of them selected. Shift and D to duplicate. We're going to go in the X direction, so let's select X. Come over here, double check it. G and X, let's get that where we want it. And actually we can fix this array really quickly just by clicking that one. And at the moment it's at 5.25. If I just select minus, it's now on the right side. And then because our stairs aren't perfectly in the center, because that always looks a bit boring, let's up that count so we've got them on both sides. Great. Next up, railing. So again, bring in a cube. Let's go to side view, G, bring that over here. That's S and Z to make it a bit thinner. So we don't want it too thin. At the moment the X is 1 millimeter. It might be okay. Let's up that to 2. It's going to be a bit chunky. Let's say 1.8. That should be okay. And then we'll G and get that somewhere around there. Okay, notice I've got that going into the column slightly, and that's actually really useful. And then we just need to G and Y, and let's bring that back there. What I'm doing is, you'll notice I'm trying to put it perfectly centered in the column, or as close to. We don't need to be too exact on that front. And then let's make it wider, so S and Y, and then let's make that about that wide. Right, that looks fine. Now we're going to go out of using the scale, so I'm going to press Control and A, apply the scale, Tab, and we'll press 3 to go into face mode, and let's just bring that all the way out, so G and X, and bring that out to about here, because that's what we're going to want. Yep. And then we're actually going to make this bit at the same time, just because it causes less problems that way with what we're going to do. So I'm going to press Control and R, and then I'm going to bring that all the way to here. Let's have a look. That's not really a square, is it? So G and X, and let's get that to there, and then select that face. Notice that because we've started making loops, this has gone back into edge mode, so I need to go back into face mode, and then we're going to extrude this out by pressing E and bringing that down to about there. Good stuff. Right, let's check everything out and make sure it's okay. So first thing that's not okay, we've got that not taking up the full space there. So let's go into face mode. We're going to press G and X to make sure that that's got enough space there. In fact, that was really lazy of us. We should also be selecting these edges here, because otherwise it's going to not make a very uniform shape. So let's do that. G and X. Let's make sure that's being covered. Let's have a look at this side over here. And again, similar sort of problem. 3 for face mode, select that. 2 for edge mode, that edge, and that edge. And then G. Let's make sure we can see that problem. So that's there. So G and Y. And let's just get that out a little bit further. Good. And finally, this one looks like it's coming out a little bit too far. Either that, or we need to make this one come out further as well. In fact, I think I like the idea of making that one come out further. So face mode there, G and Y, and then bring that out a little bit further. Right, that's looking much better. Right, let's start making this a little bit more interesting. So I'm going to press Control and R to bring in a loop. And I'm going to put it probably a little bit down there. Then we're going to press Control and B. We're going to bevel it just once to add sort of like a ridge going around it. It should look nice and interesting. And we're going to have to use our extrude manifold. So I'm going to click on that. So we need, at the moment, we're in edge mode, so face mode, that one and that. So let's extrude that in by, I don't know what looks good. Something around there. Let's just make sure we're doing the same each time. So minus is 0.3. Then we're going to do the same here. Extrude it in. Just going to do that by this bit, minus 0.3. And then we need to do that on our ends. Minus 0.3. And then we've got to do that here. Here, and that one. And finally, don't need to do on this end here because that's effectively being cut off by the edge of the scene. Now, as you can tell, this starts to take a while. This is why having hard ops where you can just select it all in one go and do it makes it so much easier. Right, back into edge mode, off of extrusion. So we're going to select this edge with an Alt, Shift and Alt. Let's go there. Oh, this isn't liking that, so let's select off that. Oh, that's because of these little bits here. So let's just do this manually. So Shift, 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 and there, and there. And we're going to want this end bit here as well. Do we want to leave that flat? Let's leave that flat for now and see how it looks. Control and B. Let's round that off. Something like that. Okay, notice we've had to do this in one go because it fixes a lot of issues here and makes everything work a little nicer. Right, and we've got our banister going around the outside. Again, pretty happy with that. Okay, it's gonna, actually I'm not sure this is gonna even be visible, but let's do it. So we're gonna go back into face mode. I'm gonna select this face, and this face. I'm gonna press I to inset. Just a little bit, and we're just going to extrude that up. So E, just by a tiny amount, just have a little sort of raised ridge there. Not sure we're even going to see that unless we've got a really top end printer, but we know it's there. Excellent. Right, let's duplicate that, Shift D, press X, so it's just going over this side. Let's get that in the right place. G and Z again. And now we need to flip this effectively, but that's, in fact, let's go over here. It's going to be easier to see. Control Z, G and X. There you go, that looks better. But we are going to have to fix this problem, and we can't do that this time because we're not using an array, but we can scale it. So if we just check our scales are right, because otherwise that's going to cause problems, S, and we want to scale it in the X direction, and we just want to scale it to -1, and that's going to flip it around. That has actually meant we're going to have to change this bit again. Let's get back here. Shift and Z so we can see both edges. G and X. Let's do a little bit more. About there. And we're going to need to bring this bit out. So let's go to here, select it, face select. We want that face, that face, that face. Actually, we're going to need to move those two with it. Okay, notice I've done those bits at the top because otherwise we're going to be left with that little ridge just being up to there. G, then X, and just bring that out. Done that a little bit further. Yes, I do. There, there, there. And G and X. So I've got our banister now, and we're starting to get something that looks a little bit more complete. We're going to leave that there for now, so let's save this. File, save as, and as always, just click the plus to make it the third file. Save as, and we're good to go. I hope you've enjoyed these follow alongs so far. You can see my Instagram handle at the bottom of the page, so do feel free to link me into anything that you've done. I'd really like to see your work. And we'll be continuing this in the third video by adding some more fine detail and damaging some different areas to make it look a little bit more battle-worn and interesting. So do subscribe and hit that bell button so you know when the next video comes out, and I look forward to seeing you then.